This second lesson is on the economic theories of regulation. What is it about the way economists look at regulation that would help us figure out what kind of wireless regulation is actually going to work? There are two competing theories of regulation in economics. First, the public interest theory of regulation, and second, the economic theory of regulation. Economists believe the economic theory of regulation to be the best description of the real world. But that's not the way most people look at the regulatory process. Most people look at regulation from the standpoint of what economists call the public interest theory of regulation. The public interest theory of regulation is defined by two characteristics. One assumes that economic markets are very fragile. If they're fragile, they break, and when they break, you have to fix them. One way to fix them, perhaps the best way to fix them, is to regulate. But the second characteristic of public interest theory of regulation is the belief that regulation is costless. Issuing a regulation is assumed to have no extra cost to society. Most people's view of regulation is like what we're calling this public interest view. It's popular because many people believe this is the way the world works. So if something's wrong, you regulate it. If you regulate it, the regulation is virtually costless. Now, economists take a very different view of regulation. Our view is called the economic theory of regulation. This view is defined by two very different characteristics than the public interest approach. The first characteristic is that government regulation is a special form of consideration. In other words, when government creates a regulation, it's actually a special consideration for somebody or some group. And the second characteristic is that this special consideration can be distributed much like a product, usually through some sort of oligopoly cartel, or maybe even in a monopolistic form of distribution. Let's take a look at that first characteristic. Government consideration is a product. There are many lobbying organizations on the Beltway around Washington, D.C. in the United States. The reason for that is that most businesses have an office in Washington, D.C. in order to lobby government. The people in those offices spend a great deal of time lobbying members of Congress. What do they lobby Congress for? What could they hope to get? What they hope to get is some sort of special consideration. They hope to get some sort of regulation that puts them in a better position than their competitors. In a sense, special consideration is a product of what lobbyists will do, and they try to convince regulators in the Senate and the House of Representatives, and perhaps at some of the governmental agencies like the Federal Communications Commission, that their regulation will make the public better off. That if they get this particular regulation, we'll all be made better off. The reality is that it's probably going to be the industry or the particular firm that's going to be made better off. And the regulators view the special consideration as a product that they can essentially distribute through monopoly power. They will extract the price from the people who are doing the lobbying in order to pass certain regulations. Most regulations turn out to be price regulations. Note that net neutrality is a price regulation. It's a form of price fixing in which the price is the same for every bit transmitted, whether it's transmitted wirelessly or over a set of wires. Price regulations have been around for a very long time, both in the wireless arena and the non-wireless arena. We have public utility commissions in the United States that set prices for most public utilities. Public utilities would be things like the electric power company and the natural gas company that you use to heat your house. Public utility commissions set rates because usually we only allow one firm to provide the product. These rates are not market prices, they're rates set by government officials. For instance, here in the area where I live in Indiana, there's only one company that's allowed to bring electric wires into my house. If I want electricity, and virtually everybody does, I have to buy electricity from that single company. So that one company becomes a de facto monopoly. It's called a public utility. But that public utility would probably raise prices and act like a monopoly if they were allowed to make pricing decisions on their own. What we've done is to create a public utility commissions. These commissions are made up of product consumers, experts in the transmission of the product, and production experts. This government-appointed group sets the rates. We would ideally like the commission to attempt to set rates at competitive prices. Prices in competitive markets tend to be the lowest possible for consumers, and that would be ideal. But because there's no competition in this particular market, the rates would be high monopoly rates if the power company sets the rates. That would mean we wouldn't get the benefits of competition. That's one of the reasons why economists would like to see a great deal of competition in the wireless arena rather than seeing the situation in which you have a monopoly. We'd like to see a situation in which there were competitors so that the consumer will benefit from the effects of competition. We would like to have more than one wireless provider of both services and devices. We want to have more than one company providing virtually everything in the wireless area. The economist's prediction is that the consumers are going to be better off if that's the case. Will the firms providing the goods be better off? We'll know they'll be able to make a profit, but probably only a normal profit, not an excess profit. Let's see what happens when you regulate something. Whether regulation the way economists look at it is what actually happens, or whether regulation the way the public interest group theory looks at it actually happens.